Hello, I'm Kilpo1, and welcome to the September patch video. Let's go ahead and dive into our first major piece of content this patch, the tunnels. So the tunnels. What these are basically procedurally generated, at least lightly so, tile set maps that are underground under the map, and they form as a way of essentially a multiraid mechanic or a glue holding all of the maps together. And they are essentially just multi-raid. So the way it currently works is that if you do not want to pay anything, you will start at Tunnel A. From Tunnel A, you'll go to Scorched Enclave or Mesa. When you extract from either of those maps, you'll have a choice. You can either go back to the innards, or you can go to Tunnel B. And then that loop repeats. So Tunnel B, let's say we go to Mech Trench, we can go to Tunnel C or go back to the innards, and then Tunnel C, Stairway or Frozen Swamp, we can extract or go to the next map, and so on and so forth. And the way this loop currently works, it's a one-way sort of loop. So we cannot go back. If we go to Tunnel C, we can't go back to Tunnel B. If we go to Tunnel C, we can't go to D. We have to go through Stairway or Frozen Swamp. And it makes the map currently a bit misleading as the straight lines between the tunnels don't actually connect yet. Now, that might just be for now. Keep in mind, this is a very foundational system. It's very bare bones. It's a scaffolding from then built up from. So probably a lot of the features they're hoping for to include with this aren't here currently. And so maybe the intent is there for us to be able to go to Tunnel A to Tunnel B, but it's not currently in the game. And like I said before, these maps are at least somewhat procedural. I'm not sure if they're full procedural, but at least they feel procedural. And they've alluded to, I have not seen it yet because it hasn't happened yet, but they've alluded to a daily reset on these tunnels. That being every day, at 7 p.m. EST, or basically midnight GMT, these tunnels will change and reset to a new layout. Essentially, right now, if you play multiple runs in a day, you can kind of learn the path of a map and learn where to go to get to a certain map, right? Because you might not know the quickest way to get to the Ashen Mesa extract on Tunnel A, but through playing the map multiple times, you can learn that. And unfortunately, it really, I think, punishes casual players a bit too much because they are probably the ones who need to learn the layouts the most and have some form of stability in the game. The people who don't need the stability are the people who play a lot like myself. The casuals are the ones who need that extra stability to get through maps and need to be able to learn things and kind of use that to aid in them getting through the game. They've also added in scav checkpoints. So essentially on each tunnel map, there will be a dedicated room with a drone where you can save the game. The way this currently works is that it will take you back to the main menu and then you can continue from that save. You cannot do anything outside of that once you save. And it feels like maybe a bare bones stopgap. And I've heard anecdotally, I don't know this to be true yet, I need to test this today, that if you save your progress on a scav checkpoint and the maps reset, like during the daily reset, you get sent back to your innards. Like I said, I don't know this to be true, but I hope it's not, because it seems like kind of contrary to the reason why someone would use a checkpoint. Like if you're a casual player, right, and you know, say if you stop in Tunnel B or C for the day, so you can go do Tunnel D later. If you come back the next day and your progress is reset, it feels really shitty, right? So hopefully that's not the case, or if it's the case, it's just a quick stopgap for now as they work on functionality. One big thing to note is everything is centralized around the host. What that means is if the host dies, you guys are kind of fucked. The host controls what maps you go to. The host controls, you know, if the host dies, they're the session host. You can't just have them go back to the innards. And I've heard too that, like, let's say for example, you're playing with 3 other of your friends and one of your friends dies. They get downed and then they die. They're kind of fucked. As in, essentially, they go back to their innards and they can't rejoin you, to my knowledge. I hope this is once again just a stopgap for now, and I'm not sure if this is fully true or just half true, but I really hope it's not the case if it is true, because it just doesn't seem right in the sense of, hey, you're playing with your friends and one of your friends died, so now they're out of the game for potentially an hour, if not longer. You basically are forcing a bunch of the players to go back to the innards now because one of their friends died. But yeah, I hope it's not the case. I don't know to be exactly sure, but yeah, we'll see. All right, drones. They've added 3 new drones to the game. The most relevant for tunnels are going to be the fast travel drone and the tombstone recovery drone. So the tombstone recovery drone is pretty self-explanatory. It recovers your tombstone if you have one. I don't believe if you die in tunnels you can get your shit back without one of these, so it might be nice to have on hand if you're doing really risky things. The other one is the fast travel drone. So right now, to visit any of the maps outside of Mesa, Scorched Enclave, or Tunnel A, you have to pay a fast travel drone cost. And until you get to the Tunnel D maps, not Tunnel D itself, but the Tunnel D maps of Babel, Downtown, or Cemetery, it only costs 1 drone. So you can go to Mesa or Scorched Enclave only with water. You can go to Tunnel A for absolutely free. Tunnel B and onward up to Tunnel D will cost the water cost, as you can see on the map currently, and a fast travel drone. And the last 3 maps will cost 2 fast travel drones and the amount of water it specifies. Right now, you can craft the drones and get a few of them from quests, but the costs are pretty high. It seems like for the most part, they want you to go through tunnels and they want you to only use the drones when you really want to skip. We'll get into the crafting later, but essentially for the most part, you're gonna be going through the tunnels a lot of the time. And if you want to use drones en masse, you kind of have to do certain paths and quests, which we'll go into in a bit. All right. Let's move on to our next section now. All right, crafting and upgrades. So there is a whole new plethora of items in the game that may or may not have various uses. Quite a few of them do, but I wouldn't say all of them do. And it is kind of nice to get new items in the game, even if most of them are just junk loot. It does kind of bloat the loot pool, but I would much rather some of these newer items replace some of the older ones because they do look interesting and actually have some flavor behind them. At least quite a few of them do. It's important to note that these newer items also don't really have an associated weight or volume to them. They all have kind of placeholder values of 0.1, 0.1, and so you can carry a metric shit ton of these new items. So abuse that while you can. You'll probably be confused because you think you're carrying a lot more than you are, and you probably are, but it's just that these things have no really weight or volume to them yet. So have fun with that, though they still have their credit value. There's new recipes to utilize most of these crafting components, and it has done a good job of giving some of these items some value now, even if they're not directly being sold. A big part of this is the components to craft fast travel drones, right? So if you want to skip going through tunnels, you need fast travel drones, and so you need to craft them, and you kind of probably want all the materials to make those drones. Unfortunately, the real-life timer is still slapped on crafting. The drones themselves are basically instant, but the materials to craft the drones, if you need to combine any base reagents, you do have to spend time crafting them, and it does not line up very well with the current longer gameplay loop they're kind of reinforcing with this update. So there's a bit of the conflicting things going on, and I think they can resolve it in time, maybe with the death of the IRL timer, but I digress. So along with a few new recipes and drone crafting, we have 2 new inner upgrades to the innards that are both kind of, I would say, stretch goals for players who want to grind. So there is the training range, which essentially is what it sounds like. It's a training range where you can practice with firearms that you wouldn't normally be able to do. This is a nice change because having to use Scrapyard as the de facto training range was always kind of and there's additional actual tools you can use on this training range to get information like damage, which is very helpful. Now, the cost though is quite large. Millions of credits and lots of reagents that I have found to not be easy to get yet, which I will say is a nice feature. It gives you something to look for, to grind for, to have some gear fear over once you find in raid. I would say just the biggest thing right now though is it goes abruptly from what we've had before, which was pretty easy, to the exact polar opposite where you instantly have this dichotomy between all of the earlier stuff, which is pretty easy, and now this top tier stuff, which is very quickly kind of hard to grind for. And both the training range and our next item have multiple different tiers, which get harder and harder to craft as time goes by. So our last innards upgrade is called the living quarters. The base foundation of this just unlocks a room for you, to my knowledge, but as you actually get more upgrades to the living quarters, your scavenger starts getting some buffs. I believe it's all max HP buffs of pretty substantial amounts, but just like the training range, this is both expensive and hard to grind for, so it's really a stretch goal for players to sink time into if they're looking for something to do. For newer casual players, this is probably not something you'll be doing, I imagine, as it is going to be a slog. Alright, on to our last section, fixes and other changes. Our first one is the dynamic HUD, and essentially what this is it turns on or off the HUD depending on what you're doing or what you're receiving or what you're draining. If your stamina gets too low, the HUD shows. If your HP starts taking damage, the HUD shows. But if nothing is currently happening, if you're not trying to do anything with your HUD or shooting, the HUD will hide, letting you kind of have the immersive experience of no HUD with none of the downsides of the lack of information. And overall, I like this feature a lot. I hope we can maybe tune it a bit more in the future, as not all elements will hide, and I would like to probably change the timings a bit here and there, but overall it's a very nice feature. Additional active quest. So as part of this longer game loop, they have added an additional quest you can have to bring that total up to 4. So you can now carry 4 quests as you go do multi-raid. And this was a necessary change, but it's kind of it doesn't do enough by and of itself. A lot of the quests require some TLC to really adjust the rewards for the risk you're taking. Air mantling. So when you're jumping midair now or you're falling midair, you can hit space again to mantle while you're in the air. A very necessary change or inclusion for tunnels. You'll be doing lots of mantling and jumping down here. Perhaps even too much, but that's a separate point entirely. A reload fix. So there was an issue in the previous patches where if you got staggered or knocked down while reloading, it could bug out your character. This is a fix for that. And lastly, the stamina drain fix. So there was an issue last patch where if you mantled on low stamina, it would essentially put you into the negatives and you couldn't recover your stamina. And this is a fix for that. Alright, let's go over to our summary section now, where I'll talk about kind of at a high level how I feel about the patch. Alright, so the tunnels patch. How do I feel about it? Overall, I think it's a positive change, but there's a giant asterisk mark. This is definitively the biggest patch we've had yet in regards to content and changing the gameplay loop. The game ultimately plays different than it did before this patch. However, the friction, the necessary friction added by tunnels exacerbates literally every other pain point in the game. If you didn't like stagger, it will feel worse. If you didn't like getting stun locked, it's going to feel worse. If you didn't like the movement, it's going to feel worse. By adding this necessary friction to this game at a foundational level, it makes everything else that's bad in the game feel worse. But it's important to note that that doesn't mean that necessarily tunnels in and of itself is bad. Just that everything else needs to be fixed and amended. It highlights the other pain points in the game. For example, on my stream yesterday, I'm recording this the day after I streamed, the EXO, there was an EXO in the corner that wasn't moving at all in a dark corner. It wasn't patrolling, wasn't moving. It was just in a dark corner, and on Tunnels 4, it just shot me in the back, staggered me, or knocked me down, I can't remember which, and then instantly killed me with a melee attack. And that didn't necessarily feel really fair. For myself, I can roll with the punches, at least most of the time, but I wouldn't be able to blame any other player for getting very frustrated and mad at that, especially if they spent an hour beforehand getting to that point. And so it's going to be very important in the coming weeks, months, quarters, years, how they refine this system. However, unlike a lot of their other patches beforehand, they now have a foundation in which to do that. So ultimately, I'm happy about this patch. I know it has its issues, but I do think it was a necessary change. That's it for the patch video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Take it easy, and I'll see you next time.